Welcome to the TEMSEA Leadership Podcast, a powerful resource for EMS professionals ready to lead from within. Your host, Eric Kloss, is a tenured paramedic, master's prepared nurse with a focus on leadership, national speaker, and two-time author. Together, we're here to inspire, educate, and elevate the EMS community, one leader at a time. Don't just listen, join the conversation. Like, subscribe, and let's grow together.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the TEMSEA Leadership Podcast. My name's Eric Kloss. I have the honor to be able to be your host. We have a special treat for you today. We are going to let you listen to one of the sessions that our host, Phil Sanderson, brought you. Phil's the host of our leadership coaching calls that happen once per month. And in this episode is special because Phil interviews several people from across the state that share valuable insights that I know is going to add value to you. So hang on, everybody. This episode is going to be one to remember.
Good morning, everybody. That is our time to get started. I hope you came today expecting to take away something, because I got a feeling you're going to take away a whole lot. This is a 1 hour special episode. This is our first year anniversary. We've got some great minds, great leaders on this call. It is all the previous guests, with the exception of three, Robert Bird, Greg Miller, and Stephen Sutton, unable to make it this morning. But we'll definitely try to do justice and fill in some of the key points that they gave us on their call. Remember, the most important person you ever lead is yourself. That's why we do that. That is the theme for this call. Please go out and listen to all of our podcasts, as well as these calls that are posted on YouTube and Spotify. Search for Tennessee EMS Education Association or Tennessee EMS Educators. Should be able to pull it up in a Google search such as that. Again, these calls, as well as this one, will be posted live on YouTube under the Tennessee EMS Educators YouTube page. Well, I don't want to waste any more time, because we got a lot of folks that's got some great information. We have speakers here. I'm just going to run through their names right quick. If you want to know more about their introductions, please go back to their particular episode and listen to it, because we did do introductions formally with those individuals there. So today, we're going to call this episode the Leadership Roundtable. And there's going to be so much information to come out of this. If you hadn't grabbed a pencil or paper or whatever you take notes on, I'd highly encourage you to do that now. We have Nathan Sweet. We have Jeff Davis. We have April Miller. We have Tanya Sanderson. We have Michael Wallace. We have Brian Carlson. We have David Blevins. We have Joyce Knowles. And again, like I said, unfortunately, Greg Miller, Steve Sutton, and Robert Bird unable to attend this morning. So we'll just kick this thing off with Mr. Nathan Sweet up here, Captain America himself. If you don't know Nathan, he's got a story about that. He could definitely share that with you if you call him up. He won't hesitate at all. So Nathan, you actually were our second guest on this call. So that would have been in May. And kind of interestingly enough, we didn't exactly plan it this way, but you followed Robert Bird, who was the first guest, and you worked for Robert, and Robert retired, and you got that opportunity to fill his shoes, and you've done well. And I know Robert's very proud of the legacy that you're leaving as well. So, Nathan, you talked about going back to your why.
Yeah.
And I would just say, before you get started, for the folks here, if you are struggling in any way, or if you are excited about what you're doing, either one, stop and think about that why, because that's really what should be keeping you going. So Nathan, tell us about why it's important to go back to your why.
Yeah, it is. It's very important, honestly. You need to define what that is. So clinically, we talk a lot about going back to your basics. We, at every level, they talk about when you are in a critical situation, remember to go back to your basics. So it's to a certain extent, it's really a lot like that, but it kind of reminds me about 19 years ago, as we were preparing for our first child, we went through this exercise that the hospital led of all these things we wanted to happen when our child was born, all these things, these good things, everything we wanted, the delivery day, how we wanted to go, and we put those in order, and then they started having to where we peeled them away. Well, if only half of those could have, which half would you pick? Well, until we got down to the last thing, and everybody in the room had the same last thing. We wanted our baby to be healthy. If anything else went great, that's awesome. It boiled down to that. So going back to your why is very much the same as that. It's great to sit down and say, what are the things you want to happen? What are the things you want to see? What are the things you'd like to see 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? But when you start peeling that away and say, well, what's the one thing that has to happen in regards to you, that becomes your why. What is the motivation that you have? Because if you're not in the storm, I know we're talking figuratively. I know somebody on here are actually literally walking in storms, but when you get to those storms, because in leadership, storms are going to happen. They're bound to. That's part of your journey, is to have those storms. So when you get hit by that storm, and you start to question what's going on, you have to have those whys to help guide you and motivate you and put you on the path that you intended to. Because if not, those storms can blow you off direction. And if you don't have what is defined for you as your direction, you're not targeting something in particular, that why, you're going to get blown in different directions. That at some point you're going to start to think, how did I get here? And that why really starts to define that direction that you head in.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if I couldn't think of a better way to kick this call off, here we go. Jeff, what about that?
I tell you what, that's that's a foundation that everybody, every leader, every person needs, is that foundation of why. Because, like you said, you're going to come back to that, and everybody needs. Anybody that's breathing, they need encouragement, because you're always dealing with something. People are going through things, so having that why will help bring that foundation. You can go back to that and then start moving forward and continue on your path. And with that, I'd say when I was on, I talked about, do you care? Can you help me? And can I trust you? And that ties right in with what he said. It goes together hand in hand. People want to know that a leader cares about them and that they can help them. And initially, that an employee or people will give you some trust, but you have to earn their loyalty. So it does take work. It does take reaching out to others. And one of my mentors, John Maxwell, said, always touch your heart before you ask for a hand. And I had something happen. I'll share it right quick. Back when I worked with a gentleman named Brent Lemons, we had a person working for us that wasn't meeting the policy of what we asked him to wear for shoes. And so we called him in to talk to him about his shoes, and actually was wearing white shoes instead of black. And he broke down and started crying. And he said, I don't have the money to buy them. And we got up right then, and Brent said, let's go. And we went to the shoe store, and Brent bought that young man a pair of shoes, and said, don't say anything, or, I don't want it talked about per se, but Brent done that to show the young man he cared about him. And that resonated, I know, with him, and it certainly did with me. But Brent was that kind of person. He always showed the way, and people do what people see. So he definitely put some seed in the ground with me and with others. But I just wanted to share that story. It really impacted my life, and still to this day.
Yeah, for those of us who had the privilege of knowing Brent Lemons, I mean, that's who he was. He was just a great person. He cared about people, and there's so many stories about the things that he did like that, and just setting the foundations for what the organizations that he worked at impacted still today. So that's a great story there. One of the things that we talked about on the call whenever I was on and Eric did, we talked about self-limiting beliefs and kind of going back to your why and going back to, you know, like sharing the story there, Jeff. Sometimes people have these self-limiting beliefs. They just don't feel like they're good enough. They don't understand that, hey, this thing called why and versus willpower is a little bit different. So one of the things that we talked about here, and I love this quote, is people don't rise to the level of their beliefs. They rise to the level of their self-worth. Now let that soak in for a minute, because so many times people want to be something, or they want to do something, or they want to be something more, but maybe they can't afford the pair of shoes. you know Maybe they didn't grow up in a place where it was supportive for them to go out and be the absolute best that they can be, so they feel like that their self-worth is a lot less than what they really believe they could be. you know Sometimes this becomes a self-sabotage kind of thing. And whenever whenever leaders are trying to grow and things are overwhelming and sabotage comes into place, I would encourage us to think about our why. Go back to why we're doing this. Why are we leading these people? Why do we want to do this? I had the opportunity last night, as I was on a plane ride back to Nashville. I watched the movie Rudy. Everybody's seen the movie Rudy, I'm sure, right? So I jotted down a little quote, two little quotes from that movie I thought was just perfect for this talk this morning. Uh, you know, Rudy's friend told him, said, having dreams is what makes life tolerable. I thought that was great. His friend, they were sitting there having lunch or at the steel mill, and Rudy's friend that died in the movie said, Rudy, having dreams is what makes life tolerable. But then his father, and this is where sometimes self-limiting beliefs comes in. His father told him that chasing his father told him that chasing a stupid dream causes everyone around you to have nothing but heartache. As leaders, as individuals, as people, sometimes that's the dilemma we're in. So our confidence levels are low, our self-limited beliefs are low, but we have to always understand and know what our why is. And as leaders, as we are going to get into talking about mentoring here in a few minutes, if we see those folks who have that great potential, pick them up, care for them, buy them a pair of shoes, and mentor them, because we never know how great they might become. So, April, I don't want to steal your thunder. I love your little saying.
Phil, you are so correct. True leadership is not about being the best leader in the world. It's about being the right leader at the right moment. You and Eric talk a lot about the number one person that you can lead is yourself. And if we take that a step further, I would say that the next best person you can lead is the person that's in front of you. We don't lead job titles. We don't lead positions. We lead people. And leadership's personal. It's about presence, not power. It's making that connection, getting in there, meeting them where they're at. People are not static. They grow, they regress, they change. They have good days, they have bad days, and we've got to meet them where they are. As they say, connection before correction. You got to be present. You can't lead from a distance. And when you have that person in front of you, and you don't know what they need, my philosophy on that is the hugged, heard, or helped, and trying to figure out what that person in front of you needs. Because if you miss the mark, you lose the opportunity to influence that person and lead that person. And when we talk about hugged, heard, or helped, does that person in front of you just needs some kind of encouragement? Do they need to be uplifted? Do they need to know that everything's going to be okay? Are they just looking for a safe space to vent, to get out whatever's on their shoulder, their chest, whether that's work related, personal related, whatever? They just need somebody to talk to, or are they looking for you to do something? I'm also a strong believer in not doing for someone what they can do for themselves. We are not the all doers of all doing, but sometimes they need you to intervene, whether that's stepping into a situation that's out of their control, doing something that's outside of their reach, or whatever that may be. We've all been there. That new hire, that new grad may just need to know that it's okay, that it's going to work out, everybody's going to be great. That frustrated supervisor that's at their wits' ends may just need to vent, and that old disgruntled burnout employee that we've all give up on may just need to feel like he's heard and he's validated, or that he is seen by leadership. And finding out what these people need, the key to that is flexibility, and it is a daily discipline of observation and intention when we are trying to lead other people.
Yeah, sometimes they just got to be helped, hugged, or heard. That's in my famous quotes right there. So, Tanya, anything you got to add to this?
And I'm not one of the EMS heroes on the call, and so the roles I've had are a little bit different. And so just kind of thinking about what you guys have talked about and how you support and help your employees, the why and the hows of leadership. When I joined, we talked about transformation, and we've been leading, and you guys have been leading through actual storms lately, physical storms, but there's other kind of storms out there, and transformation is one of those, and that's really hard for employees when you're kind of moving their cheese. If you haven't read the book before, if you move their cheese quite often, and those of us on this call are, we've been around the industry for a while. We're a little bit, on up in years, and that it's harder to change as you get older, especially when you're used to something. And so when you start transforming a lot and moving the cheese, especially people who have been doing things a certain way, that can be difficult. And so one of the things that I really have focused on is leading with empathy and integrity and grace, and kind of a pivotal moment. And Jeff, your story about the shoes, and Brent, personally, and I shared this when I joined Phil before, years ago when my mother was dying, I was walking around the office one day, and one of my employees was walking by, and he said, you could smile every once in a while. And he didn't know what I was going through. And I share this story a lot. I share it with other leaders because at that moment, I realized it was kind of a pivotal in my leadership. I feel like he didn't know what I was going through. He didn't know my mother was dying and the decisions that I was needing to make. And I have employees like that. It made me realize that we don't always know what's going on. We don't know that they can't afford those shoes, right? We don't know that they've got marital issues, financial issues. And so their jobs can be really difficult. And especially when you're going through tough times, but you always have to remember there's a person on the other end of every decision you make, everything that you do, and they have a life, and they can have some of these difficult things that they're going through, these difficult personal storms. And I think that's really important to remember as leaders, that put yourself in their shoes and think about what they may be going through as well. So if they're not on their best behavior, if they're, or their best, self, giving grace in those situations, I think is important as well. It doesn't mean you don't hold people accountable, and that's even more difficult when they're going through something, but there's accountability. But being able to really lean in, have that empathy, have that grace, and have that understanding that we're all human, and every one of us goes through something different in our personal lives. I think that's just another important thing to remember in leadership.
Yeah, that's really great. All right, Michael.
Good morning. Yeah, I'll jump right in. When I joined earlier, and as I'm reflecting on what the others have had to say this morning, it's just so connected. We discussed drama in the workplace, which was really has become, oddly enough, one of my favorite topics. And I'll confess by saying I probably got to it in a very roundabout way just many years ago. Started my career in EMS almost 4 decades ago now. And I realized that obviously the work that we do is grounded in drama. Every day we respond to crisis and human suffering, and that's just part of the work. And it's our job to bring calm to the chaos. And I really struggled with that for a while. I was very excited in the beginning, and I struggled with it and recognized that over time that me being amped up and simmering in the drama, so to speak, did not help the situations that I was dealing with. And certainly that applies to the work environment, and it certainly applies, quite frankly, to society as a whole today. And I think we would all agree that we're in quite the hyper-polarizing environment for the last decade or so, and it just keeps getting worse. A lot of that's amplified with social media, and we just have such a way of grabbing a hold of slivers of truth and amplifying it in overly dramatic ways to make a point and to catch attention, to drive things home. But the problem with that is, of course, is it taps into our emotion. And that's the problem that I was initially talking about from the beginning. As emergency providers, we realize that if we don't bring calm to critical situations, then there's a physiological shift that happens in our brains, all of us. The more we tap into our emotion in crisis, and the more we tap into the amygdala and the hormones that are released, stress hormones that are released in our body, and then we get amped up. The problem with that is we lose our ability to not only think thoughtfully and make good decisions, but we also lose our empathy and our connection and just compassion and understanding for each other and the people that we're caring for. And because we shift into that more fight or flight mode. And that, for me, has been a lifelong lesson, why drama is so important to really talk about as leaders, to emphasize, to model, not reacting to hyperpolarizing statements or distortions of reality, and really exemplifying calm in the chaos, and taking the time to listen and empathize and connect, and really guide our teammates in doing the same. It matters at the end of the day. For us, we can easily tie it back to patient outcomes, but it's more than that. It's about the outcomes of our teams and how we care for each other and really make a difference in the world.
Yeah, very true, very true. Michael, you shared a story on your call. Think you can fit that in here to share the story where you had a new truck and you had a staff meeting, created a little drama? Just to show everybody how this drama thing really gets out of hand quick.
Yeah. I think we probably talked about what I affectionately call the great styrofoam cup debacle of 2015, I think was the year. Highly, it was obviously with an EMS organization, and highly thoughtful command staff meeting. And there had been tension building for quite some time over, we had brand new district chief vehicles, and somebody had bought a big gulp styrofoam cup full of Coke and broke the cup in the vehicle and spilled it all over the interior and the radios. And there was much, and of course they didn't confess to it, and there was much drama associated with that, and including these very dramatic statements of, we got to have a policy, and no more styrofoam cups. And in the command staff meeting, this got so passionate and so nearly out of control. Sincerely, there was almost a fist fight over the styrofoam cup debacle. And honestly, it was the perfect moment to rein the team in and have everybody take a breath and really talk through the emotions they were feeling as leaders over something, quite frankly, that was silly. But we're all human, and it's easy to spin out of control and get drawn into something that when you look back on it, you can affectionately kind of chuckle and realize, my goodness, at the end of the day, that's not really what matters. So
That's a great story. Anybody else have drama in their workplace? Styrofoam cup drama? Well, that's a good segue in here to psychologically safe environment, right, Brian?
Yeah, it is. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning. And I wanted to acknowledge just starting of all of you taking an hour of your time to invest in yourself and to listen to the wisdom on this, but also the wisdom from each other. So kudos to you for taking the time. And I'd like to just talk for just a minute or two about the topic of psychological safety. I don't think I have to tell this group, leadership's hard. Leadership is incredibly hard. You're not only dealing with yourself, but you're dealing with, an individual human, you're dealing with team dynamics, you're dealing with political issues, just general run of every day, staffing, finances, you name it. Leadership is really hard. So give yourself grace for what you do every single day, because it's not easy. But being a leader, part of being a leader is to understand that we're always on stage. People are always watching what we're doing, what we're saying, how we're saying, what we're not doing, what we're not saying. We're always on stage. People are always watching. And, the term psychological safety has been around for a little while, but it's really about creating an environment where people feel safe to raise their hands, to feel connected and say, hey, I agree with that or I disagree with that. I would say, Michael, your story, you probably didn't have a psychologically safe organization where you were at because they didn't feel comfortable to raise their hands. Says, yes, I busted that styrofoam cup in the front of the cab, which I'm sure was an absolute mess. So I just wanted to offer 4 tips to consider, 4 things to consider to how to create a psychologically safe environment. So the first is to think about, how do you make clear why voices matter? What do you say? How do you conduct in team meetings or in huddles or in one-on-ones that you are open and willing to accept the input of others? And that's not only saying, please tell me, but it's also in your reaction. So number 2 is, how do you react to that? That when someone raises their hand and when someone gives you feedback, how do you react? And think of it both in verbal and nonverbal terms. And I would pose to you that nonverbal is just as strong, if not stronger, than verbal. The reactions on your face, the rolling of eyes, huffing and puffing, whatever it may be mindful of how you are responding. Third thing is, when you're having staff meetings, you're trying to solve a problem. Too often, I coached a leader one time, they viewed themselves as command and control. They were the boss, and they were going to tell everybody, here's what I want you to do, and here's why I want you to do it. And that can work in some situations. I completely get it. But if you're trying to build a true psychologically safe environment, that doesn't work very well. Those don't sit well. So one of the things that I coached this leader on was to consider, they were struggling with the problem. They didn't know the solution. And I said, well, go into the staff meeting and just be honest about it. Guys, I don't know the answer to this, and I need your help. We have to solve this together because I don't have the answers. And I'm hoping someone in this room is smarter than I and can come up with a great idea. The second they did that, the whole environment of that team started to shift, because they saw their leader as not only a leader, but a fallible leader, someone who was willing to admit, I don't have the answers and I need your help to figure out how to do it. So when you have a problem, raise your hand and say, guys, I need help. I need to figure it out. I don't have the answers. The last point is, just make it clear why voices matter, that they're all important. We're all important in what we say. So what I'd like to leave you with is this quote, which I is one of my favorites. I use it every month in new leader orientation at Vanderbilt, and it's unclaimed. So I wish I could claim it, but it's this: what you permit, you promote; what you allow, you encourage; and what you condone, you own. I'll say that again: what you permit, you promote; what you allow, you encourage; and what you condone, you own. So if you are allowing behaviors that are counter to your organization's, your station's credo, your values, you are in fact promoting those, and others are going to follow them. And those values, they're probably going to be creating a non-psychologically safe organization. And then, of course, you own those. it starts with us. It's not easy. And I commend all of you for taking the time this morning to invest in yourselves.
I love that permit you promote. We talked about that on the call that you were on, because so many leaders permit a lot.
First responders are the backbone of our communities, but often funding restrictions leave stations without essential resources. That's where Serve Strong, Corbin Scott Goad Memorial Foundation steps in. They understand that not every response is a rescue, which is why they focus on ensuring first responders are well rested, physically fit, mentally strong, and equipped with the resources and education they need to save lives. Serve Strong is dedicated to filling in the gaps for first responders, addressing needs that stations might not be able to cover. The foundation exists because of the compassion and professionalism of first responders, witnessed firsthand in the midst of tragic circumstances. If your department needs support, or if you want to support their mission, visit servestrong.us. That's servestrong.us. Serve Strong, Corbin Scott Goad Memorial Foundation. Because when we're strong, our communities are strong too. Don't miss out on the first ever Serve Strong Bash, happening Saturday, October the 4th in Fairfield Glade. Save that date. Serve Strong, Corbin Scott Goad Memorial Foundation, filling in the gaps for first responders.
I love that permit you promote. We talked about that on the call that you were on, because so many leaders permit a lot. I think we could all probably raise our hand and go, yeah, I remember a time whenever maybe we were that immature leader where we permitted a lot and maybe we didn't know. But unfortunately, there are still a lot of I'll call them career leaders that still permit a lot. And they promote that, as you say. You mentioned about being on stage, and you mentioned about not having the answers. I think a lot of times we as leaders, we forget that we're on stage, and I think we need to always have the answers, and that's important. If you're a leader, you need to know that yes, you're on stage, but you also got to take time away from being off stage, and take time for your own health and mental health, because leadership can be very stressful. And also it's very, very important to be able to raise your hand and say, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I'll do my best to try to help find out the answers. Together we can do that. That was really great.
I'd like to chime in on that comment of we're always on a stage. And I think I get what you guys are saying, but to the emotions, we need to have emotions, but we need to do better to be in control of our emotions rather than being controlled by our emotions. And that's where you can get that hypersensitivity and balance or imbalance. But conflict is okay. But trying to manage and navigate that conflict is really the hard part. A lot of good things come out of conflict. A lot of good growth can come out of conflict, but I do stress that, be who you are. You play your role for sure. That's your responsibility, but be who you are and try to be that at all times.
That's a good viewpoint there. Thanks, Nathan, for sharing that. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would just say, I think to Nathan's point about being on a stage, and I shared this in mine, one of my favorites is the Theodore Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena. And so it's more than being on the stage, it's you're in the arena and, you've got the critics, but you're down there, you're in the fight, you're daring greatly. And so I agree. It's, it is, you are in the spotlight. So to Brian's point of, about being on a stage, but it is more, you're in the arena and you're in the fight day in and day out.
Yeah.
Hey
Yeah,
guys, I wanted to chime in on the conflict. So I've been reading a book that's talking about the need for leaders to be challenged and allow themselves to have holes poked in their own beliefs. And the quote was never be afraid of being proven wrong, but be afraid of being wrong and thinking you're right. Like you said, challenge, being conflict, having those difficult conversations can often lead to you improving yourself as a leader and seeing a blind spot that you may not have realized you had also.
Thanks for that. Good viewpoint. And I believe, I mean, everybody here's got some great viewpoints there, and certainly, to Nathan's point, as a leader, you never want to be an actor. But I think to Brian and the kind of the theme of being on stage is basically, how you're handling things. You don't want to get up there and there be just conflict. Conflict is good. Conflict makes us grow. But you don't want to be the guy up there just having a seizure, as we can all relate to, and just breaking down, because then things go south. You definitely want to be strong, but and keep yourself together and be able to show emotions as well. Absolutely. Good points. Yeah.
So can I just add one
Yeah.
blind spot to that? And Nathan, I completely agree. The analogy of stage, no, we're not actors. So spotlight is really what it's after, and the analogy there. But one of the blind spots that I think leaders can have is favoritism. If you play favorites within your group, and people are watching and they know, well, Michael is Brian's favorite. He always goes to Michael to ask the questions or get the answers to it, or whatever the case may be. Everybody else is watching what's going on there, and that's going to further inhibit them in raising their hand. And that's the blind spots that start to exist, because now you don't have a 360 view of what's going on in the organization, of your own performance. So be careful of having your favorites and playing too much or leaning too heavily into those.
Yeah, 100%. Good stuff. Good conversation. David, let's talk about mentoring, mentorship, tacos.
Taco Tuesday, right? It's find your person, find your keyword in rock and roll. Well, I'm glad to be here. I have the opportunity to be sitting. That's why I've had my video off. I'm hanging out in the hotel room in Washington, D.C., having an opportunity to advocate on behalf of this profession. And a lot of that is because of this mentorship opportunities that I have had. But, when I take a look at this, why is this mentor-mentee relationship good, and why is it something we should look at? I mean, look at what we've got going on here this morning. We've got leaders from across the state of Tennessee that are pouring into people. We've got people that are sitting here watching. And now what we're seeing in between each one of these is those people are turning around and engaging with that and basically mentoring back to those that have spent the last 37 minutes doing their mentorship to everybody else. So that's this right here is the exact example of what this whole relationship needs to be. Like, we need people whose primary purpose is to make us better, and then to utilize that to make somebody else better. This profession is one in which we need every single individual in here. We need these individuals rising up, because a lot of us, Nathan Sweet especially, as old as he is getting, he's going to be rolling out sometime soon. He's not on his video right now, so I can poke at him, but he's going to be rolling out. Okay, Jeff Davis, but these individuals are going to be rolling out. We need the next generation, and we don't need them to take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to become a good leader, because there's people that are looking up to them to make this happen. So early on in your career, whether you're just a few days in, whether you're multiple years in, whether you're a field provider, you're a educator, you're a service director, you're a regional individual, you're working for a hospital base, fire base, municipal base, it doesn't matter. Reach out to somebody, find those people like the Jeff Davis, the Michael Wallace. Like, there's an individual on this call right now, and he's going to hate that I'm going to shout out. But every year at TEMSEA, one of the main reasons I go, besides the content, is to talk to Gerald Foon. That man right there knows so much about this profession, has taught me so much, and these little gentle nuggets that are awesome and have made me a better provider, hopefully made me a better leader, and able to help and pass that on to everybody else. Find your people, both as a mentor and as a mentee. So why should you have both? Well, we learn both up and down. So we can teach to somebody and they can teach to us. It's not a unidirectional pathway. It's bidirectional. You're going to learn something from everybody on this call. If we allowed time for everybody to speak, we're going to learn a little nugget from everybody. So the other part to that is that mentorship, when you get intentional, and that's what you and I talked about, Phil, is the intentional mentorship. When you actually pick up and call somebody and make that ask, will you be my mentor? It's one of those times all of these people could care less how much you know until they know how much you care. And once you create that intentionality, once you create that, then that person switches from I'm going to help him to it's my job to help him. I want to help him. I want him to succeed because like now that individual knows that you're invested in that relationship. So figure out what your tacos are, get that set up, find your people. It's not just one, it's multiple people. You got all like Joyce out in West Tennessee has got a hospital-based system. She's been the president of TAS a couple times. Like she's gone around a lot of things. Phil, you have many different relationships. And then you got Tanya that's hanging out in here with a completely different perspective outside of EMS, which is something we need to grow. Like make sure your mentors are making sure you're being good people, making sure you're being good providers, and making sure that you're being caring and compassionate to everybody else.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And just for the audience here and for everybody outside of myself and David and I share a mentor, and our kind of keyword for we need some mentoring is we text him and say something about having tacos. So that's kind of time for tacos, and definitely he has a lot to share.
And that mentor will turn around and he actually goes, "Hey, David, it's time for tacos," because he needs something. It's a bi-directional relationship.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Anybody got anything they want to share about a great mentor or mentee relationship that they've had? Any leaders?
Phil, it's Gerald.
Hey, Gerald. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Since David mentioned my name, I guess I better defend myself. So I just want to say one thing. It's maybe a little different perspective from everybody else because, my career is ended and I've retired. But what I want to say is what I call a FedEx moment hidden in plain sight, because I don't know if you can see it or not, but I happen to have a FedEx envelope. But can everybody see this? See the FedEx? How many times have you seen that FedEx? Look at the red E and the X. Now look right there at the space between there. There's an arrow right there. Y'all see it now?
Uh-huh.
Y'all see it?
Yep.
How many times have you seen this logo?
A lot.
You've never seen that before till I showed it to you, correct?
Right.
You'll never be able to get that out of your mind now that I showed it to you. Now, why am I telling you about that or giving that example? Because my career has ended, but I think all your guests here that have shared their leadership and they're in the trenches right now, and mine's over, and all those people on this call that are listening and watching, they may or may not become leaders. But what I want to say is, in our field, we all had the same common background. We started out as EMTs, went to paramedic school, etc. And then after that, we all went into the field for anywhere from, I would say, probably 3 to 7 years of field work. And then we started getting into some kind of leadership role, whether it was like starting to teach CPR or be a field preceptor or anything like that. But during that time, after you finished your training and you got out in the field, all that time you spent in the field, it prepared each and every one of you for what you're doing now. Now, those that aren't in leadership roles right now, all that time you're spending out in the field right now is preparing you for something that's going to be coming later on. Now, as I said, my career has ended, and I look back at it, and there's certain things that happened in my career, and all I can say is it was all laid out for me, and I truly believe that. And I think you and I had that conversation once before. But I want everybody to understand that even though you're not in a leadership now, or if you're in a leadership right now, what you did before you got into that position out in the field prepared you for this. Now, my own personal example was I went straight from engineering school into EMS. Didn't know about EMS, but I went straight from engineering school into EMS. And I think back, and now I had my FedEx moments. And I always said that I never was a practicing engineer. But then I started thinking about it after I retired. You know what? You were practicing engineering. You taught the most complex, perfect engineering system ever created. And that was the human body. And, that I didn't realize at the time, but that's what I was doing. And there's something else in my 4 years of engineering school that I saw each and every day, and I didn't realize it, but I took my daughters to my campus one time to show them where I went to school. And my youngest daughter saw a quote, and I didn't realize how much it affected me. And the quote was from Albert Einstein. And the quote was, you don't truly really understand something and until you can explain it in the simplest terms. So in 4 years of engineering school, I didn't realize it that I was being trained to break problems down and present them in the very simplest way. So hopefully that kind of, if you think about your career, those of you in leadership and those of you in the field right now, all that is preparing you for what's to come in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gerald. That's a great analogy with engineering. It kind of fits right in with something that Robert Byrd talked about, is building those relationships. And I can't stress to our listeners enough, and even us as experienced leaders, we can never devalue the relationships that we build along the way. Engineering, doing those CPR classes, whatever it is, going back to your why. If you aspire to be more, start that plan now. Everything that everybody on this call said is definitely part of that engineering. That's a great analogy. Joyce, you talked about something that you are very good at and I'm terrible at, and that's being a good listener. You are probably one of the best at that. So tell us about how to be a good mentor and being a good listener.
Well, I think Mr. Gerald's right. From the very first time we come into EMT school, we're taught to be leaders, and we learn to lead in the field, and we learn to, take control of the scene and to lead and to make decisions on our patient. And I think sometimes when we become managers or leaders, we kind of lose a little bit of, we think we have to make that decision. We think we have to make immediate decisions. And sometimes we're already preparing our answer before the person that we're talking to even gets done talking. So we don't truly hear what they're saying because we're thinking about what we're going to respond back with. And so it's okay to take a minute and maybe even to recap to that person. So what I heard you say was, and then kind of repeat what you think you heard them say. And it's okay to take a minute and say, let me think about that. Or, not feel we got to make an immediate decision on some stuff. And if we're going to mentor people, it goes back to what everybody has said before us on here. We have to know where they are, and we have to meet them where they are. I love April's quote there, and I'm going to use it, April, by the way. But I think that we have to spend time listening to whoever we're mentoring, and on the same turn, when David gets the call or makes the call to go get tacos, he has to be prepared to listen to what the mentor says. And so it is a two-way street, and we have to make sure that we're listening on both ends of that. I've had a lot of great mentors, and I pick up something from each one of them. But the most important thing I've picked up was learning how to hear what people say. It's really been a lifelong event to learn to do that, because I can remember, I had to make a decision really quick. I was preparing what I was going to respond back to an employee when they would come to me with something, or and sometimes all they want to do is vent. So listen is the most important thing you can do. They may not really need you to tell them anything. They just need somebody to be a sounding board so that they can actually say what their mind is struggling with. And so to me, listening is the most important part of being a mentor. To thank all of my mentors and all of those who actually would even consider choosing me to mentor them, for at least letting me be a part of their life and learning how to listen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And as Tanya, my wife, would tell you, I don't do that so well, but she does that well. I'm going to call her out here on the spot here. Tanya, you got anything to add to being a good listener? Because you do that much better than I do.
I don't know that I do, but I think it goes back to what we said earlier about knowing that they're a person, they have feelings, they have things going on. And so being able to listen, sometimes when you really intentionally listen, you can pick up on what's going on behind the scenes and then really meet them where they're at. Sometimes it's going beyond what they said, like Joyce and others have said. Sometimes they need to vent, but then sometimes if you're really intentionally listening, you'll hear behind that why maybe they need to vent, why there's something else that's going on in their life.
Anybody else want to add anything to being a good listener?
I would like to, it goes back to that, trying to figure out what they need. If they're just venting and just want to be heard and you do something, you're going to miss the mark on that. If they do need you to do something and you don't want to get labeled in that category. Well, it doesn't do any good to say anything. So and so doesn't do anything, or you can't say something because they will do something. And if you can't figure it out, just ask. Ask them if they need you to do something. Ask them, if they're looking for a solution or if they're just wanting to vent.
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. While we're getting some folks that are putting maybe some questions here in the chat, I just want to kind of sum up a little bit of something that Stephen and Greg both added to the call. When Stephen Sutton was on, he talked about continuous growth, personally and professionally, and also the benefits of getting up early. Continuous growth as a leader. If we as leaders want to become better leaders, we have to grow every single day. It's a journey. It's not that, okay, we arrived at this particular leadership position, now we can just stop. It needs to continue on. We have to get up every day, join the mentoring calls, read the books, get mentored, mentor others. All the things that we've talked about today, it's definitely a continuous growth that we have to be very intentional about. And, Stephen hit on a really good point about getting up early. All the books that I've read, from successful leaders, you get up early because there's no, as Stephen put on his call, there's nobody else up but him. There's no text messaging. There's no emails. It gives him time to reflect. It gives him time to go and physically and mentally gather himself, whether it be go to the gym or just sit in a quiet moment and reflect on, the journey that he's on. And then Greg, on our last call, gave a great analogy of leadership, and I'm not going to do it justice. And I really hate that Greg's not here to give Greg isms, as we call it. But after the call last time, we kept the recorder on, thank goodness, and captured this. But we were just talking just like we are here. And Greg said, the best analogy of leadership I can think about, he said, I was on a Zoom call one day and I had a glass of Coke, and he said, and I put a cube of ice in there. He said, I got to thinking that I put one cube of ice in this glass of liquid and it just kind of floats on top. But if I keep putting cubes of ice in there, the liquid gets colder, which is the desired effect that we want a cold glass of Coke. He said, but what I realize is that first piece of ice is the top leader. If I want to make my organization better, I got to keep adding more ice in there, and I keep getting pushed down to the bottom, which means I'm growing more and more leaders. And the more ice cubes I put in this glass of water, the more leaders I grow in my organization. I thought that was fantastic. I was just kind of like, wow, I've never thought of that before. Again, I wish Greg was here to share that with us. We did put on our last call, we did a little clip in there. Larry Miller, thank you for putting this in. Says, any good tips to mitigate the drama, reducing and avoiding drama? Any, Michael or any of the other leaders want to weigh on this? Any good tips to mitigate the drama, reducing and avoiding drama?
Hey, from my limited perspective, I'll certainly say it's a challenge. It starts with you first, starts with me, and certainly professional behavior is a skill just like anything else that we train on. And it's very important as leaders for us to acknowledge that, not just drama, but just professional behavior in general, and really teach and mentor and guide our teams in why it matters, what's important about it. And then, to Brian's point, psychological safety, the more we cultivate that environment where our teams understand and trust the feedback that we are able to interact with each other, create that safe space so they can certainly share what matters, their perspective, but also guide them, keep them between the guardrails, so to speak, in how to convey professional feedback and information. And that means that when we're in more of a drama mode, we got to be able to call each other out on that in a professional way, and add to over time. It takes time, and you'll never reach the mark of the high calling and it be perfect. That's for sure. There's always drama, and we're all prone to those emotions. that drive the drama behind us. Nathan even said, and I agree wholeheartedly, we're not trying to eliminate our emotions. That's a whole nother problem, right? We got to be able to feel and empathize and connect. At the same time, we've got to model what's a place of reality and not allow drama to infect our organizations.
Yeah.
I'll just add that in my experience, drama is usually created when there's communication voids. So when there's an emptiness of what's going on in communication, people feel that with their own stories. And when those own stories get created, the drama starts from there on out. Now, communication's hard because you can't, in these roles, you can't be transparent about everything. But there's acknowledgement that, hey, we're human, mistakes happen, I'm handling it, I'm aware of it, and we're going to move forward with this and move on, and I'll deal with the individual who ever made the error, but that's not for the whole station's awareness, understanding. It's one-on-one, and I know you want me to handle you the same way if you were in that situation. Communication, I think, can really stifle or stoke up drama.
Absolutely. We got time for another question here. When challenges occur, how do you remind yourself of your why? How do you stay focused?
Chiming in real quick on that. When you get the opportunity and you literally sit down and you chew on what actually is your why, and you have defined that, it becomes apparent in pretty much everything you navigate. It's just like when I wake up in the morning, I know and I understand that I'm married, because that is present in my everyday. And when you have your why and it is present in your everyday, on your mind, through your speech, through your eyes and what you're seeing, you won't have to become reminded of it. You are actually going to be living it, but you have to define it to the depths that it can go and start applying it. And you won't, I don't think you'll forget it. I don't think you will.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. Well, producer Lee, behind the scenes, has given us our little song that says it's time to wrap it up. This has been a fantastic call. Thank everybody for your hour here. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope that you're taking away. I'm certainly taking away a lot. Just a couple of real quick things before we depart here. We talked about purpose-driven leadership, your why. Don't forget that as leaders. We talked about empathy and genuine care. It is so important that we care for the people that is on our team. And servant leadership, super important. If you don't understand what servant leadership is, please look that up. Call one of the folks on this call, because it's definitely important. Integrity and authenticity, as well as inspiring growth and development, and definitely, mitigate the drama, keep your environment psychologically safe, and be a great listener. If you practice all those things, I guarantee you're going to be a top-notch leader. Remember, we do this because the most important person that we'll ever lead is ourselves. And I think if we keep ourselves in line, then I think we'll be better off in helping everybody else in our team. So thank y'all for your time. Have a blessed day. Be safe and enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next month.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the TEMSEA Leadership Podcast. We hope this episode added value to you. We just wanted to pause for just a moment and to thank you for what it is that you do. Your work matters, and you really do make a difference. We are looking forward to connecting with you again soon. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.